Ladies and gentlemen, this is kind of a late video, but from the title, you understand it is an analysis of the just concluded by elections. Of course, we've done a lot of videos about these by elections, analyzing what the results would mean to specific people. And from the look of things, ladies and gentlemen, our predictions weren't that far off. In fact, the fact that we didn't predict the winner, I just shared that. I just shared what victory would mean to certain people, but I was categorical that ODM, of course, especially Joe, had to win Magarini because there was a lot of things at stake. Uh, ODM had to win Kasipul. I explained the reasons in one of the videos. And of course, ODM had to win Ugunja. UDA winning Mbeere is stealing a seat that technically belonged to the so-called united opposition. And winning Malava is retaining their seat. So this is very important, ladies and gentlemen, to understand that in Malava, the candidate was an ANC candidate. Then you know that ANC went and merged with the UDA. So technically, the seat that belonged to ANC now belong to UDA, and they have successfully defended it, though it was not a very easy race. And I shared why it was not a very easy race. You remember Panyako, who was now going for this, who was vying on behalf of the united opposition, was the runners-up in the last election. And the difference between him and the late Malulu Injendi was barely 2,000 votes. So it was a close competition in the last election, that is the 2022 election. And it was also very close. Though currently we are still dealing with provisional results, you understand that very little will change, because if you've seen official congratulatory messages from senior officials of the party, etc., there's very little that will change, because these people are making their calculation based on the results they have. Like in Mbeere North, it's a close call, but it has been called nonetheless. So we are still waiting for IBC official results. But as you know, ladies and gentlemen, these results, like I was saying, are not going to change that much. In this video, what I wanted to share with you is why this particular by-election is a big blow to the united opposition led by Rigathi Gachagua, and how it informs Ruto's movement moving forward. Let's begin with Gachagua. There is something we call over-promising and under-delivering. So you make certain promises that you're not sure whether you have the ability to deliver. Okay, so you're not sure whether you have the ability to deliver whatever it is that you're promising, but you end up promising it nonetheless. And if you ask me, that is the situation the united opposition led by Gachagua found themselves in. The reason as to why I'm saying they overpromised has everything to do with Rigathi's statements. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, yeah, okay, forgive me for that. I was just testing whether the audio is there, because I might be talking and there is no audio. But I was saying that the reason as to why I was saying there is a danger in overpromising and under-delivering, Rigathi made it very clear that Mount Kenya was done with William Ruto. And in one of the videos that I was analyzing, I think Mbeere, and what the results would mean to both Gachagua, Muturi, and President Ruto, I was categorical that Rigathi dared William Ruto, and William Ruto called this bluff. And what do I mean by that? Remember, the by-election in Mbeere was artificially caused. If you can remember, it's not as if somebody died or there was a petition there. It is the president of the republic nominating the only DP member of parliament, the only DP member of parliament, to replace the DP leader, that is Muturi, as a cabinet secretary. And he did this when that Muturi was already in cahoot with Rigathi Gachagua, meaning supporting the united opposition. He also did this knowing very well that Rigathi Gachagua had promised or had stated that Mount Kenya was done with William Ruto, that there is no way that region wants to even hear anything to do with UDA. He said that the UDA party was dead. It was now a Kalenjin party, to quote him. But that is why I say it is dangerous to make certain promises when you are not aware, when you are not very sure whether you can deliver the results or you can't. And that is what has happened to Rigathi Gachagua. He made these unnecessary threats, even claiming that he cut short his US tour to come and handle by elections. Then you end up losing all the parliamentary seats. All. You don't win even a single one. You don't win even a single one. And now you are left with excuses. Oh, I was fighting against the old government. I was doing this. Those are now excuses after losing. You said, you made the promise that UDA was nowhere to be seen, that UDA was not needed. It was dead, completely dead in Mount Kenya. Yet it wins a seat in your own backyard. The people like Governor Cecil Mbeere, that Rigathi was calling Karinda, uh, Karinda, and also the deputy president, Professor Kindiki, who Rigathi named Soprano. These people campaigned as if it was the end of time, and it delivered. Now, like I said, we are going to look at these results in from two angles. One, how it affects Rigathi, and I've said it's a big blow to him. And of course, how it informs William Ruto's politics moving forward. For Rigathi, he overpromised, not knowing whether he could deliver or not. And so even if he was to give people excuse today, it won't work. Had he been quiet, then the excuse of campaigning against the entire government would have really worked, because he would say, see, I was impeached. They believed that I was going to be out of the way very soon. I would disappear into political oblivion. Nobody would care about me in any way. But here I am giving the government a run for their money. You see, that makes sense, because you had not promised that Mount Kenya is yours and it is your zone. Nobody should come there. If you had not promised, then people would sympathize with you. And there's something I said here, ladies and gentlemen. I said that in politics, people love an underdog everywhere in the world. It's not a Kenyan thing. Even in real life, people love an underdog. When people feel that you are weak and you are facing a very strong opponent, it is natural for humans to sympathize with you. That is why even if a small kid was to throw something to really injure you, if you were to uh, clench your fist and start beating up this kid, people would forget what the kid did, because according to them, this is a very small person. In fact, some cases you are being told to pick your size. Rigathi would have played that game where you talk you talk less and you act more. He would have been not making those unnecessary remarks about Mount Kenya being his zone. He decides what happens there, and Ruto is a done deal. Now that Ruto has taken Mbeere, and remember I said Mbeere was not a UDA seat. It was the opposition's seat, and it has been picked. We go to William Ruto. How does this inform William Ruto's politics moving forward? Number one, it gives William Ruto leverage against ODM. You see, there was this notion that William Ruto is a pariah, if I may, in Mount Kenya, is not needed. And so he was now totally going to depend on ODM, especially Luos, for his 2027. I even shared with you some time back that if this by-election proved otherwise, meaning if Muturi and Rigathi and his team retained that seat, then William Ruto would be at the mercy of ODM. I believe if you watched one of those videos, that is what I said. He would be at the mercy of ODM, because that means that he will now have to look for something to replace the Mount Kenya that he had lost. And I argued this way, ladies and gentlemen. When Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto had issues, there happened to be a by-election in Georgia, if some of you can remember. In this by-election, Moses Kuria, using a party called PEP, won this by-election, but it was with the support. Then UDA had not been formed, had not been named UDA. It was an existing party in parliament anyway that they named UDA. It was difficult for Ruto to register a new party, so they used the like of Mudama to buy a party that was existing in parliament already. But I digress. What I was saying is, Moses Kuria won with the support of Ruto, and they went to Kiamba and won the same. And when we came to the general election of 2022, it was the same trend. So if William Ruto had lost Mbeere North, it would have meant that the region is done with him. But now that it is not very definitive, I am not saying that majority of Mount Kenya people are now going to support Ruto. Politically, I don't believe in such political naivety, not at all. I know that this is just a by-election, but it is an indicator that not everything is lost, meaning William Ruto can still struggle, can still go and fight for the soul of Mount Kenya. He can even get 50% in 2027. But I'm not saying that now, because of this by-election, Mount Kenya is now back to William Ruto. If I told you that, I would be disrespecting you, ladies and gentlemen. What I was saying is, it now gives William Ruto a room to breathe, because ODM, in Swahili we say walikuwa wamekuja sana. ODM were now telling Ruto, you see, you don't have anything in Mount Kenya. The likes of Kindiki are useless to you. You have to now work with us, or else we are also going to support somebody, or we will even field a candidate. Now that UDA has scooped a lot of seats across the country, and so has ODM, and there is also that gap in Mount Kenya, that possibility of winning seats in Mount Kenya. William Ruto is not going to be intimidated. Ladies and gentlemen, that is what I wanted to share with you. I can see there are a lot of comments here. I don't know whether I should go through some and see if there was a question. That is what I would I would suggest. If you had a question about the topic, like about this by-election, then I would try to sample some. If you have any, if there is something you'd want to know, okay, which seat, which by-election results would you want us to explain more? So that we can, if you have a question, you can ask there, and I will try my best to answer. But I hope you got the point, ladies and gentlemen, and I'm very grateful that you tuned in. The funny part is that there are over 300 of you, and only 24 liked the video. So perhaps you disagree with what I was saying, but even if you did, I would like to hear what your opinion on this particular by-elections are. I can see, let me see. Okay, so there is Wamorire is asking, we talk about Malava. So like I said earlier, Malava was an interesting one. Interesting in that the candidate who was representing the opposition in this by-election was actually UDA's candidate. In fact, there were elements within UDA who tried to stop Panyako from being the DAP candidate because they were arguing that he had not even resigned from UDA officially. But at times you realize that if you push this a lot, at the end of the day, people will be like, why are you afraid of Panyako vying? So he was led to vie. But also remember, he is the one who vied against the late Malulu Njendi, and he only lost by 2,000 votes. So it was not it was not what you would call a landslide, by the way. So that was the first interesting part. The candidate who was vying for the opposition was actually UDA's candidate. Now, in this particular by-election, the one for Malava, Haluale, who is the majority whip in Senate, was openly campaigning for the DAP candidate. Of course, I explained why. Luale feels that in this broad-based government, William Ruto is embracing Fernandez Baraza. And because he's embracing him, that complicates Aluale's desires to become the governor of Kakamega. So he feels like Fernandez is going for a second term, and in this broad-based government, they might even have zoning so that you can't field a candidate, let's say, in areas that are considered ODM. And so that's why Aluale was rebelling. If any of you was wondering why Aluale was all of a sudden rebelling and anti-Ruto, it has nothing to do with him hating Ruto, etc. No. Aluale is just being practical. He's saying if William Ruto is working with, in this broad-based government, has to work with Barasa, then I must find new friends, because chances are it might complicate things for me. The same thing for Mohamed Ali Jichopevu, aka Jichopevu. But what I was saying is, Aluale was campaigning for DAP. But then the deputy party leader of that DAP, who is none other than Ayub Savula, was campaigning for UDA. So it was a very interesting political contest. Initially, DCP had a candidate, and I want to share with you, without fear of contradiction, that I believe Malala and DCP are happy that DAP lost Malava, because initially they had fielded a candidate there. They had fielded a candidate in Malava, and they believed that that candidate of theirs would win. But then DAP said, you focus on Murima, we focus on Western. Just to quote Natembeya verbatim, he said, our agreement with Rigathi is that he focuses in Murima and we focus in Western. So there's a part of Malala, and I'm not making this up. Malala was very open about all this. It was like they should have been left to field a candidate. In fact, Rigathi had to call him. Those of you who followed politics, then Rigathi had to call him to tone him down, because he had said they are fielding a candidate no matter what. So I think Bwana Wamorire, that is the context of that particular by-election. Now, what does this result mean? The results to one Natembeya, not even Eugene. Eugene may be the party leader, but with all due respect, is colorless, politically speaking. So Natembeya is the one who was trying to test the waters. The entire thing, the entire decision to field a DAP candidate in Kakamega, in Malava, of all the places, was simply to test whether this so-called Tawe movement was being accepted across Lueland. Had they won, Natembeya would have been emboldened, and he would have really continued to fight Mudavadi and Wetangula. But now that they have not won, of course, they will call press conferences to give excuses here and there why they lost. They tried fighting against government. Some will even allege rigging and other things. But whatever it is, the case is, ladies and gentlemen, that election was closely contested, but they lost nonetheless. And Netambeya, chances are, is going to now refocus his energy on trying to retain his gubernatorial seat. Remember, a long time ago, when the so-called Gen Zs were saying Natembeya for president, and there were this belief that Natembeya would vie, I told you, if you can remember those who had subscribed by then, and by the way, I thank those of you who have stood with me and subscribed from day one. One day I will just do a video, a live video like this, and we will just talk about any topic you want. I am really humble. I digress anyway. What I was saying is, I did a video. In that video, ladies and gentlemen, I said that Natembeya was aiming higher so that he could score lower. He was aiming for the presidency so that the powers that be could talk to him and tell him that we will help you or we will not interfere with you getting reelected, because he feared that um, he might get even impeached. Because remember, the county assembly that Natembeya leads, majority in that particular county assembly is UDA. You should know that, followed by ODM and then Ford Kenya. So if you combine a broad-based government, Natembeya can be impeached any day. So when he aimed higher for the presidency, it was so that the people would feel challenged and say, this guy is taking Western. Let us talk to him and tell him, go back to your seat. Go back to try and retain your seat. But then he saw nobody was coming to actually even bother negotiating with him. So Natembeya made an announcement that he's going back to his seat. And I believe that is what he's going to do. The likes of Mudavadi and our friend Wetangula are feeling emboldened. They will say, this is our zone. The likes of Natembeya will not come and cause chaos. In fact, Mudavadi promised that they are going to do virtually everything to ensure that Natembeya is not re-elected. There is Otamata. I told you Mnyoro is not Mount Kenya kingpin, but your Kikuyu hate blinds you like many other people. Now, Otamato, contrary to what you think, the least hateful, let alone Kikuyu hater, I consider myself the least hateful individual. Those who have followed me for a while, even on other platforms, will tell you that. So I am sorry that you feel I have some hatred. This is raw politics. So there are certain things that we'll just have to say, but then they might come off if for some as if it is hatred. But the time for hating communities, I want to tell you, my friend, those are long gone. You cannot survive in the Kenya we have today purely on hating another community, because stereotype has its challenges. If you decide that you're going to sit down and hate millions of Kikuyus, most of whom you don't know, is a complete waste of time. Mbeere North, Martin Murungi, you could be specific, because I've talked about Mbeere North. I've talked about Malava, Evelyn Saranje, waiting for Mbeere North by election votes. I thought it is provisional results are out unless something has happened since I went live, but provisional results are out. UDA and ODM has scooped all the seats, unless, and I have to put this rider, unless something new has happened as we were having this live conversation, ladies and gentlemen. There is Victor Rotich. Victor Rotich, be specific. I've talked about Mbeere. So if you could be specific, it would really help. And those of you who are finding value from this live, you can drop a like. If you like the video, at least I feel motivated. I have 300 and more people watching, but only barely 40 something likes. So unless 330 actually don't find value in this, it's also understandable. This is politics, ladies and gentlemen. Now, there is another election I wanted to talk about. There is a Ed Quest. Is asking, what is the impact on Kenya Kwanza ticket if Wanga replaces Kindiki following Kasipul Magarini and Ugunja results? This is something that some people floated some time back, and they were saying that ODM is going to support William Ruto on condition that he gives them at least number 2 position. Remember, even when Oburu was doing his interview, he said the irreducible minimum, if they are going to work with William Ruto, is number 2. And there are those who have been floating Gladys Wanga's name as the replacement for Kindiki in 2027 election. Now, I don't want to say I speak for William Ruto. So whatever it is that I'll share with you, EdQuest, is just my view. My hope is that it makes sense. You see, Mount Kenya, especially the Kikuyu nation, let's just go with Mount Kenya. There's some guy, if you mention the word Kikuyu, he says you're a Kikuyu hater. So I also don't want to hurt his feeling and is watching live. So Mount Kenya made William Ruto president. I don't know how you want to go about it, but the ugly truth is that Mount Kenya made William Ruto president. And because they did, he made an agreement with them that you will take the second position, you will have this number of ministries, and you'll have this number of PSS, this number of appointment. Things that William Ruto has kept to date, even though the region somehow has rebelled with him. What I think might happen, EdQuest, and this is just my opinion, what I think might happen is that William Ruto might retain Kindiki Kithure as his running mate and give concession to ODM. Tell them, I'll give you the main ministries. You see, second, the runners-up, the deputy president position, is more or less an assistant job, and you need somebody who can truly assist you. And without bias here, because I am one of those who vigorously campaigned for our friend Gachagua, I can tell you that Kindiki is doing a better job assisting, because as principal assistant, you must be focused on what your boss is focused on. And I think having Kindiki as his running mate moving into past 2027 is very important if you picture what Ruto aims at achieving, because William Ruto has certain things that he needs to deliver. And it would be okay if he has somebody who is not just in sync, but someone who understands what Ruto is all about in terms of what he wants to deliver for Kenyans. So I have this belief that now that Kindiki has proven that he can have a sway in Mount Kenya, William Ruto would empower the Mount Kenya MPs. And the good thing, one thing that is working in Ruto's favor, EdQuest, if you can agree with me, is that majority, I think 90% of elected members of parliament from Mount Kenya are with William Ruto. And that, don't underestimate that. Nobody should ever lie to you in politics. And this one I say with a lot of love, ladies and gentlemen. Nobody should ever lie to you in politics that elected leaders don't mean anything. That, oh, I have the people. Even Raila Odinga would go to Luo Nyanza, of all the places, a place that he was literally being worshipped, but he would still have elected leaders from the ground, because those are the people who are closest to the people, to the voters. So you need them. William Ruto is likely to empower them, tell them that you can now face whichever party that will be competing with you, and you have a fighting chance. I think Kindiki is going to be retained, in my opinion. Now, I said I'm not speaking on behalf of Ruto. Somebody, Samuel is asking, is it official or wishful? It's provisional. The last time I checked, sir, it's provisional. Okay. Malava by election. Benedict, I did that. Nobody wants to hear anything about Magarini or Kasipol. Let me talk about Magarini. In Magarini, I told you it was a very simple race between Joe and Muhammad Ali. Now, there are some people who are saying that was far-fetched, but I don't think it was far-fetched. Here is why I said it was just a simple race between Muhammad Ali and Joe. The Magarini by-election was occasioned, as I shared with you before, by a court nullifying the elections of Harrison Kombe. Harrison Kombe had won with only 14 votes. And Stanley Kenga, a friend of mine, went to court and challenged that. And so the court nullified that election and ordered for a by-election. Harrison Kombe did not bother to go to Court of Appeal. So had these elections been done when ODM and UDA were still having issues, not working together, I can tell you here, Mr. Stanley Kenga would have won, and won big. But then things didn't work. For IBC was reconstituted just recently. And by the time IBC was being reconstituted, ladies and gentlemen, ODM and UDA were now brothers and sisters. People who were saying one term were now saying 2 terms, and those who were saying 2 terms were now saying 1 term. So this put Kenga in a very bad position. And I have to say very bad, because Raila asked that UDA and ODM should not field against each other. And then they asked that in Magarini, Harrison Kombe should be allowed to finish his term. So President called Kenga to State House Mombasa. I'm privy to this. And they talked. He was told that he understood how unfair it was, but also realities of politics is that you have to look at the bigger picture. There were good deals, suggestions for Kenga. And even before that, the president had been with him since the elections were nullified. And so he agreed. But then you see, all of a sudden, he was now back vying with DCP of all the parties in Coast. So that one smelled Muhammad Ali from very far, because Muhammad Ali is just like Oparanya. It's just like Halwale. You work with Baraza, you lose Halwale. Muhammad Ali, you bring Joe on board, you lose him. So he was like, and I'm quoting him, he went there to campaign. He said he's there to deal with Joe once for all. So it was not more or less an ODM versus DCP kind of, because DCP is not a popular party there. UDA is more popular in Kilifi than DCP by far. So it was technically, in my opinion, a war between, a rematch between Joe and Muhammad Ali. But then from the results, though provisional still, you can see it was landslide. So Muhammad Ali will have to rethink. If he is the person Rigathi is depending on to deliver cost to him, he will have to rethink again, ladies and gentlemen. Edquest says DCP has something in Kisa. I'm told what is happening to ODM here, or is it UDA? Yeah. So at a times, Edquest, do you have an interesting question? Because somebody asked, how is it that DCP had a fighting chance in Narok town of all the places? Mostly in Narok, it is demographic. And before Automata say something, I mean demographic. In Narok, there is what is going on there. Majority of the people in that town would naturally be members of DCP. And I use naturally carefully here. But in Kisa, it was a matter of a candidate. They just had a better candidate. That is what I can say, request. They just had a better candidate. In some cases, you win on the strength of the candidate you pick. There was a time in Kasipul, there is a ward called Kasipul West. And you know, Homa Bay is mostly ODM. They struggle to prove that they love Raila when he was still alive and that they are the ODM headquarter. Yet, an ODM candidate went against an independent in West Kasipul, and the independent won by far. So I was talking to some people and asking them, how was that even possible? Because it is something that you couldn't even imagine, especially in Kasipul. Kasipul is so pro ODM. And this person said the candidate was just better. Yes, that is the first time an independent won there, but the candidate was just better. So sometimes it's not so much to do with the love for the party. I don't think that now in Kisa people are members of DCP. I don't think so. A majority of them maybe didn't even look at the party, might be about the candidate being better, ladies and gentlemen. You can drop me some likes if you agree, because I can see we have a lot of people watching, but very few people are even liking the video. And I hope you are also sharing this live with your friends. There's a question by Mercy Cynthia Mbeere. I have talked about that. There is Mushiri, unless there is something specific you want to know. So if there is something specific, Mushiri and Mercy, you can just ask there. I would handle that specific. But in general, I've talked about Mbeere, I've talked about Magarini, I've talked about Malava, and I wanted now to talk about Kasipul. So there were those who believed that Kasipul was going to prove ODM wrong. I didn't believe so. I happen to come from Kasipul, so I know them. I know the dedication to the party. To just paint you a picture, the late Ondowere was not a very nice guy. It's bad in our culture and Africa culture in general to speak about those who have left us. So I will not say much, but I'll just tell you there are people who really suffered in his hand, and that was in his first term. So when you went there, you would really go and find people saying that there is no way under the sun they are going to re-elect Ongondowere, no matter what. Because this violence that people are seeing in Kasipul didn't start today. No. Not at all. It has been in Kasipul for a long time. I'm talking of years. Initially, Kasipul was called Kasipul Kabondo, so it was more or less two constituencies in one. However, one thing was remained constant: violence. For some reason, My people there believe that you resolve political differences by actually even sending some people to Sayun. But so when what Ongondowere did was to take it a notch higher to levels that people had not seen. Perhaps before there were very few cases of murder, but now it was a common thing. You differ with him, you go through a lot. But that was first time. So people say that when elections of 2022 happen, Ongondowere will not be re-elected. When he got the ODM ticket, he was overwhelmingly re-elected. So I had no belief that the independent would have won in Kasipul, because when push comes to shove, these people have proven that they are loyal to the party than this issue of looking at individual brilliance of a candidate. So he won. But what we need to note is what that means to Gladys Wanga. Gladys Wanga took the by-election in Kasipul at personal level, because the late Ongondowere, who was brutally murdered, was a personal friend of Gladys Wanga and confident. Should I add that he was the only MP of all the 8 MPs in Homa Bay that was loyal to Gladys Wanga. The rest would pretend, but they were not loyal. Ongondowere, on the other hand, would do as told. And so Gladys Wanga had a friend in him. But then he was unfortunately gunned down. So Gladys Wanga said, in her mind, the people who gunned Ongondowere down did so that they could take over the reins of Kasipul. And one of the people Gladys Wanga was openly accusing of being behind the murder would be the person who vied as the independent. Remember, this person was even arrested and barred from going to Homa Bay until a certain period at best. So Gladys took this personally. If she had lost this, it would have really dealt a big blow and complicated her re-election as a governor. She's also aiming higher. She's just doing what Natembeya was doing, aiming higher, giving the idea that she wants to be deputy president DTC, so that at least she can score low at the gubernatorial level. So that is what happened there. She won, and it has now stamped authority, not just in Kasipul. Chances are that she's now going to plant candidates in several constituencies, and any MP who is not going to toe the line, she might say, now her position being also the party chair, that we will see what to do. I will deny you the ticket and then plant somebody there and campaign for that person and win against you. What has happened to Gladys Wanga is that she has stamped authority in Homa Bay. And the people who now who are trying to get rid of her from ODM, because she also has some adversaries in ODM, these people now will have to reconsider, ladies and gentlemen. Let me see. Now is Malava. What I was discussing were provisional results. So unless something has changed, you can also notify me there if something has drastically changed. And thank you so much for liking. Now we have reached 100 likes. That is at least encouraging, considering that we are doing this. But also, ladies and gentlemen, if you would want these lives, I know I rarely do them, but if there are things that you'd want, if you'd want an interactive, once in a while we do a live or we have a schedule, so that if, unless there's something, we just have a schedule where we do lives, I would want to know if it is something that you you care about. Okay. So that is what I wanted to say. I'm seeing somebody giving a result there that Wamudende has lost now. The result has gone back to 14. So these were provisional results. We will wait, ladies and gentlemen, for official results. So I'm not going to refute your result. I'm not going to say here that you're lying, because there is another Braille is saying final results in Mbeere, Leo 14, Caris 9,000. Another one is saying Caris 16, etc. So it's an interesting world. We will wait for the official. These were just provisional results. But I thought that we needed, even though they were provisional, we needed to talk about the effect or the impact of these particular by-elections. Ladies and gentlemen, the MCA seats, there's something somebody asked about MCAs. In Kisii, interestingly, you remember that party that Matiang'i had before he moved to Jubilee. That party won some seats in Kisii. And I want to say something about Kisii, being their neighbor and also having understood how Kisii does their politics. Kisii, if Matiang'i is going to be a candidate, or let's say even a running mate, whatever it is possible that Kisii's might go with Matiang'i. So for the first time since 2013, they might vote against ODM. That is something possible in Kisii, ladies and gentlemen. In Baringo, the senator, the UDA senator, swept the race like it was a wide margin. But there is something I needed to mention about Banisa. Northeastern have swifted to William Ruto. And so whatever it is, number of seats that are in Northeastern, it is as if they are guaranteed for William Ruto. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, it is as if they are guaranteed for William Ruto. Northeastern always votes with the government. And I'm not using always here carelessly. It is, they always vote with the government. So where the government is, if Uhuru was in power, Northeastern would vote with Uhuru. That is how they have always voted. They vote with government. They might have their own party, but that party would be supporting the president of the day. So Northeastern, whatever you saw in Banisa, just shows you that that region will always vote with government, and in this case, they will be voting for Ruto. And also, if you engage the locals from there, they are very happy with the idea that they don't have to be segregated against when it comes to issuance of ID and passports. Let me see the last statements before I let you sleep. And by the way, you can let me know where you are watching from. At least you can let me know where you're watching from. Where are you watching from? Are you watching from Kenya? Which part of Kenya? Just to know where you're watching from. There is this best Korean drama. He's saying Mimi Bora ODM has won. The rest I don't care. What type of attitude is that? Now ODM is a member of broad-based. You should really care how your broad-based brothers are doing. Grace Kamau is watching from UK. Kenya Digital Media is watching from Singapore. Now, you should know, digital media, that Singapore is actually an inspiration for Kenyans. And so we are headed to Singapore. And there are some who are mocking us, but as a country, there is no sin being ambitious. That is just by the way. There's Francis Onyango was saying Gladys Wanga is a brave leader and development oriented. Hura Gladys Wanga, keep it up. You have really developed from a Bay Town. Okay, let me let her have that. There's Ngeno, good night too. Grace, thank you. I feel encouraged. Mushiri is from US, interested in Mbeere North. Mbeere North, now that most of you are still asking for Mbeere North, there's something that I needed to add, another angle. Remember, Mbeere North was a contest between two titans, William Ruto and Rigathi at the top. And then down here, it was a case between Kindiki and, of course, Rigathi. And then you go down, then you find Cecil versus Muturi or Leni Kivuti. These people were fighting for the politics of 2027. Whoever won this election didn't just care about winning, they cared about the percentage. Even those who lost this election didn't care about losing, they cared about the percentage. You see, in somebody's stronghold, let's say I claim that Mount Kenya is my stronghold, like Rigathi has done several times. In someone's stronghold, you are supposed to win by a landslide. You've seen, even though provisional, I don't know whether that has also changed. You've seen in Magarini what has happened. You've seen in Baringo, the gap. You've seen even in Banisa. Those are what we call landslide victory. You win by a big margin that it is impossible for somebody to doubt whether that is your stronghold. So if Muturi was to retain his seat, he would not just be concerned about retaining the seat. He would be concerned whether he won that seat convincingly. Because if you go to 2022, he did not win narrowly. You can check those results. So that tells you that it matters also how many votes do you have against your opponent. I gave you an example where somebody lost with 14 votes. So you can't say that is a landslide victory. That is as if it is 50-50. It's as if you are looking at the election of 2022, the presidential election, where the president won by 200,000 votes. So that is not what you would call landslide. That is not landslide by any imagination. It is purely winning on the merit of 50+1, but not a landslide victory. So in Mbeere, it also matters. You've won, yes, but with what margin? And what is your opponent having? Because this will reflect in the 2022-27, election. I had told you, this is not the first time Mount Kenya is showing us how they will vote in the general election through a by-election. In Georgia, they voted for our friend Kiombori on PEP. And when he vied again, now on UDA, he won by landslide. The same thing with Kawanjiku. He won through UDA in a by-election. And then when he went now for elections of 2022, he won by a landslide. So Mount Kenya, if they elect you in the by-election, they are telling you where the direction, which direction they are taking moving forward. And so, because you are still contesting results, so let's say Rigathi's team were to win, it is about by what margin did they win convincingly. If the difference is maybe 200 votes or 100 votes, etc., then it becomes a little bit challenging, because that means Remember, for Rigathi Gachagua to have value to whoever is going to handle Mount Kenya, Mount Kenya 2, whether it is Kalonzo or Matiang'i, it must be that Mount Kenya is locked at, let's say, 80%. So that Ruto can only struggle to get 20%. But if it is a case where they are 50-50, then it lowers his value. I thought I needed to add that. Victor Uma, your analyses are always fact. Thank you. I'm humbled. EM551, greeting, just joined. Mbeere North. I have talked about that. There's something that EM is asking, is Rigathi yet kingpin of Mount Kenya? I differentiated, there are two things here that we need to differentiate, ladies and gentlemen. The term kingpin and spokesperson might be used interchangeably, but they are not the same. You can be a spokesperson of a region, meaning you are saying what they are saying in silence. For instance, and at the risk of being controversial again, but this is raw politics anyway. For instance, the Mount Kenya people, especially the Kikuyus, had issues with William Ruto working with Raila Odinga. That is why when there was this national dialogue at Bomas, Rigathi Gachagua, who was not their favorite, and this I can debate anyone, because I was in that team. I know what happened there. Rigathi Gachagua was not their favorite. You would go to Mount Kenya, even after he had been elected as the deputy president, he was still not considered their topmost son. In fact, some people were still very loyal to